Welcome to Like Minded with Dr. Patrice. Each episode, we'll be sitting down with different types of experts and unpacking the role of mental health in our day to day lives. My name is Dr. Patrice Lagoy. I'm an international psychologist, licensed marriage and family therapist, and former entertainment executive. This episode, we will be discussing mental health representation on reality TV and its impacts on participants and viewers alike. My guest today is Ineye Komonibo, a writer and editor with a love for all things culture. Most recently, she put her cultural savvy to work as a culture critic for Refinery 29 Unbothered, covering everything from politics to social media at Thirst to the reverberation of colorism across the African diaspora. She's currently serving as the deputy managing editor of Texas Culture at Cron.com. Welcome to the show, Ineye. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm excited.
So I wanted to talk to you, of course, this is your specialty, about reality television, how, you see it impacting mental health, and that's maybe from people who are the viewers, but also people who are participants. So tell me a little bit about what you see as the real life implications of reality TV.
Yeah, so obviously it's reality television, so it's supposed to reflect our reality. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, I think that when people are pitching these shows, they're looking at the real world. What are people talking about? What are people feeling? What's going on in
Yeah.
the ether right now? What's the discourse? And so they might see like, okay, people are talking about dating, they're talking about
Mm-hmm.
wealth, they're talking about beauty standards, and then they'll go pitch these shows. And so I think it's interesting because we will see ourselves in these conversations like, oh wow, did we talk about dating that much? Oh wow, did we talk about getting married that much? Did we talk about beauty
Yeah.
and wealth that much? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that in seeing these characters, essentially they're real people, but
Yeah.
they're characters on the
Yeah.
shows, and seeing them focus so much on these topics, we're kind of checking ourselves and saying like, man, I
Mm.
kind of agree with this person. Am I problematic? Or I didn't think I would have anything in connection with this reality star, this person on The Bachelor, this person on Love Island, but I do. And so we start having this kind of like weird dissonance kind of thing. I didn't think I
Mm-hmm.
was that way, but I'm relating to this person, I'm connecting to this person. Or sometimes it's
Yeah.
confirmed, like, yeah, I knew I felt this way. I knew I was a feminist. I knew I was this. I knew it was that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just a process of constantly trying to rework our maybe our politics or the our identity and things like that, and
Mm-hmm.
seeing that blatant reflection. Obviously reality TV is a little bit produced, so it's kind of fake, but they do
Yeah.
it to the point where it's just more so like holding up that mirror and saying, hey, this is y'all, we got this idea from y'all, we know that y'all care about this. We're looking at your TikToks, we're looking at your X feeds, we're looking at your Instagram. We've been
Yes.
at the gym with you, we've been at brunch and happy hour with you. We know y'all are talking
Uh-huh.
about this. So I
Yeah.
think the fact is just that we are constantly kind of renegotiating who we are because of what we see on TV. Like I don't know that I want to feel this way because I'm connecting with
Mm.
a person who feels that way. And so that's the biggest thing that I find myself like, dang, I did not think that I would agree with this person, but I do. And I'm always having to kind of check in when I'm watching these shows.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, that kind of that mirror of, is this are these the things I value? And I guess for better or worse, right? Sometimes it may be confirmation of like, it's nice actually to see someone saying these things on TV that I agree with. And other times you're just, wait, am I that person too? What does that mean? What does that mean if I am identifying with someone that maybe I don't think of as aspirational right off the
Yeah.
bat? What does that say about us as people? I really like the point that you made about this is these ideas for these shows are not coming out of nowhere. They are coming from conversations that are being had, and of course it's heightened
Yeah.
because it's reality television, it's produced and everything. And while they're not characters, they're probably not exactly like that when there's not a camera in front of them either.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of interesting. And thinking about that, how do you see that show up? You mentioned The Bachelor, but if we're comparing something like The Bachelor, like a kind of competition dating show, compared to something like you might follow, like The Real Housewives, where this is supposed to be their day to day, how do you think that kind of skews what we see as well, or our views of
Yeah.
them?
Well, I think because The Bachelor is supposed to be they're picking regular people, so
Mm-hmm.
normal people. They're trying
Mm-hmm.
to tap into that kind of everyday hometown girl, like that roundaway girl thing to appeal to The Bachelor,
Yeah.
right? And so they want to pick people that we think like we know these people. I know a girl who
Yeah.
looks like this, who does that, whatever. On The Real Housewives of Atlanta or Beverly Hills or something, it's aspirational, right? They're
Yes.
not picking regular housewives. There's a difference between someone who lives in Beverly Hills versus a person who lives in Houston, Texas, right?
Yeah.
And I think even thinking about the stratification of the Real Housewives, there's a difference in like class or wealth levels,
Yes.
or even just kind of the way that people come off between
That's
Beverly
right.
Hills versus Atlanta or
Or
Salt Lake City.
Potomac.
Oh,
Yes.
Potomac, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And so we are watching those certain types of shows for aspiration purposes. Like, what does it feel like to be on the other side? What does it feel like to be in the
Mm.
1%? And so we are tapping in because we want to see wealthier, more lavish, more luxe lifestyles as opposed to just kind of regular day-to-day housewife situations. And I think that comes up a lot when new housewives are brought in and people are like, they're declassing the show. I want to see people who
Yeah.
are driving, you
Interesting.
know, Ferraris. I don't want to see you in your Honda. And I think it's a fair point,
That feels
but
too real.
exactly, like, why are you driving a Mini Cooper and you're a Real Housewife? What are we talking about? But so
Giselle.
that is it. Exactly. So we're watching those things for different purposes. Like, if I want to
Hmm.
experience kind of like a little bit of materialism or access to the 1%,
Yeah.
that side that I don't live, I would watch a housewife show. If I wanted
Mm.
to just have a conversation about dating and relationships, then I would watch a Bachelor. I would watch a Love Island to see more kind of down to earth people. And so that kind of skews it because you're going in with a specific mindset. I am watching this for this purpose, to scratch
Yes.
this specific itch. If I'm looking for bougie, whatever upscale lifestyles,
Hmm.
I'm going to watch these types of shows. And if I just want to see people dating and maybe crying or getting dumped or something like that, I watch
Yeah.
Love Is Blind on Netflix or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, so that's interesting. When you bring mental health into the conversation, what do you think that we are looking for when we're watching something like a Love Is Blind or a Bachelor versus something like aspirational more so?
I think that we are, this is such a weird thing to say, but maybe trying to access a a dating experience that we wouldn't regularly get, right? Obviously, when
Interesting. Hmm.
you're dating on a one-to-one basis. Not everyone. So there are some people who are, ethically non-monogamous or poly or
Hmm.
and something like that. But a typical dating experience is you meet someone, you date them, and then you either get together or you break up, right? But I think that these
Yeah.
experiences like The Bachelor or Love Island or Love is Blind, it's a very it provides a fantasy kind of thing. You're dating
Hmm.
as many people and you're having these deep experiences and you're
Yes.
diving full force in it, and it's totally acceptable because that is a space that you're in. And I think
Hmm.
that the appeal to many people is that it's very ridiculous to watch, but it's so interesting. What would it be like if I, as a person, could date and be as intense as I wanted to be? If I could show up
Mm.
and I could give you all the trauma that I've ever experienced, I can tell you my
Yes.
exact types, and I can show up like this, and you pick me for it. Like, what if I
Hmm.
showed up and dumped everything on the table on the first date, and that's what made me get married, right? That I
Yeah.
think that there's sort of that kind of spice to it. Um, I wouldn't necessarily watch a dating show where just like, yeah, I dated this person for 6 months and then we didn't talk anymore. That's so boring. That's real life. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I don't want to see a regular dating thing, but I do think that the showrunners and executives know how to spice it up. The stakes are so
Hmm.
high, and we are providing an experience that you would never get in reality. You can only get it in this reality show.
Yes. Well, and I also think about how our lives can be so well curated. You know, but if you're talking about through social media, if you're on a dating profile, you can put exactly what you want to put on
Yeah.
there, and then that contrasted with then, like you said, just dumping everything out there and saying like, okay, are you going to accept me as I am or not? And it's interesting how those shows kind of have you go very deep quickly, but you still don't obviously know a person. I've
Yeah.
told you everything that's happened through my childhood. That doesn't necessarily tell you who I am right now or like what I want to be in the future. And I think it's a very interesting, completely opposite way of trying to find your true life partner that I think is an interesting experiment. And I wonder how it impacts people after you're gone. So you've dumped everything out there on national television. It's, people can watch it for years to come. And now you go home and maybe you don't have that partner, right? So you've kind of done that. I don't know. Like, I wonder if people feel like it's for nothing, you know?
It's interesting because I also wonder, how do you go back to a Tinder or a Bumble
Yes,
or, after
exactly.
everyone knows the trauma that you've exposed. They've seen you maybe
Yes.
most times at your worst because these shows tend to
Mm-hmm.
bring out the worst in people. Um,
Yes.
how do you show up when somebody already has the cheat code to you, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
something that I wonder a lot, but people are getting married. Like they'll go on The Bachelor and they will maybe go on Bachelor in Paradise, which is like the single
Yeah.
spinoff, and then they will be like, "Oh, I actually met a random guy at church. I'm married now." And so it's just kind of like, you know, it shows that I always say that there's a lid for every pot. Your person
Yes.
is probably out there. And maybe he doesn't mind that you had a tantrum on Love is Blind, or that you threw
Yeah.
water at a girl at, at the bachelor house. Like, I don't know, but it to me, I would be a little nervous going back into the real world,
Mm.
just because you've
Yes.
exposed so much of yourself. And I think that people are not necessarily prepared for the consequences of that exposure in the real world. Like
Yeah.
you're
I think
you're there for a while, but when you come out, it's just like everyone knows you. Everyone knows your business.
Yes, I think that's right. You hear stories of people who've been on some of these shows, and they are even if they're not, trying to find a partner, they're looking for a job, and now they feel like no one's taking them seriously
Yeah.
anymore because they have seen them throwing a tantrum on TV or acting irrationally or whatever it was, and how difficult it is to transition back, and people feeling depressed, people feeling anxious because you have been so vulnerable in some ways, or
Yeah.
maybe even been edited to look a certain way, right? That may not be the reality.
Yeah. It's why you see so many of these people go on these shows across what the genres, dating shows,
Mm-hmm.
just like housewife shows or anything like that. They never go back to a typical 9 to 5. It's very
Yeah, right.
rare, because I can't, I don't want to be on LinkedIn and everyone's like, "Hey, aren't you this person from so?"
Exactly.
It's so hard to transition back. So I do think that that's why so many people tend to stay in the limelight, because it's
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
I have a safe space here. People already know me here.
Yes.
My star has already risen to a point where I'm attractive to people for this reason. So, if you
Mm-hmm.
were a doctor or a nurse before, um, it's unlikely that people would maybe have the same trust in you. Maybe like if you
Yeah,
were
that's right.
cussing somebody out or fighting on a show or something like that, it's too hard to transition back. So I do think that that's why people are like now full-time content creators or influencers, or
Mm-hmm.
some people even might pivot to making music. Like there's a
Yeah.
different space for you now, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I wonder if people, anticipate that ahead of time. When you're going in and you're thinking, okay, this is going to change my life because I'm going to find this person, or I'm going to be on Real Housewives and it's going to help me build my personal brand and everything, and then I can go back to regular life. And as you said, they often just kind of get in a cycle of having to go on the next reality show or a spin-off of that because real life is difficult, and maybe
Yeah.
people even like miss having that attention, in some ways, right?
Yeah.
Because I think of, our brains can get very addicted to that kind of attention, right? It's the same reason, like, we want to scroll, we post something on social media, and we're like, oh, who commented, who liked it? Like, our brains, and I imagine how much more heightened that is when you're on TV and people know you and they love you, or they love who you think you are, or they love hating you, right? Either
Yeah.
way, people are paying attention to you, and that is not going to happen if you're, back into your regular life.
Yeah. And you kind of have to take the bad with the good, because it's not going to be
Mm.
all, happy comments and, followers. And
Yeah.
I think that, at least in my opinion, I wrote about this before, that I do think that a lot of people now are going into these spaces with the intention of totally overhauling their life.
Mm.
You are
Mm.
prepared to not go back to your 9 to 5. You are not going back to grad school. You are not going back to, because it is an opportunity now that media and social media and the internet and reality TV shows, they've kind of democratized fame and celebrity in a
Mm.
sense that it's very accessible for people. And a
Yes.
reality show is the quickest way for you to get that immediate exposure. At the very least, a couple million people are going to see you on TV every single
Mm-hmm.
day or every single week. And so people are going in. I don't necessarily know the emotional and mental preparation that goes into it, but at the very least, I am going to get TikTok famous. People are going to be
Yes.
talking about me, and maybe I can get a brand deal, maybe I can get a sponsorship. So I do think that, you know, you could find your the love of your life, right? You could have a new network of friends if you're a housewife. You could, but at the
Yes.
very least, I know that I can get a bag, or I can
Mm-hmm. That's
get,
right. You're
yeah, I can
right.
pivot. And so I do think that that's a big draw for people. Again, the preparedness, like the other side of that, I don't think people prepare for it. Like, oh wow, people
Yeah.
meet me and they're talking about how I look, and they're talking about this, and they're saying I'm a bad person, and you're trying to balance out the bad with the good.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because do you think that there is a way to mentally prepare? Like, if I've never been on a reality show, I can tell you what I think it might be like, but I don't really know because until you get there, you don't also know, are you going to be the beloved character that people want around? Are you going to be the villain, right? And how is
Yeah.
that going to impact your life? And does that change season to season, probably with a lot of these shows? And so, like, what do you think? Because you've written about this extensively about the different reality shows and everything, what do you see as missing? Like, how do you think people could emotionally prepare better to go into these situations?
To be honest, I don't know that there is a way to go in
Yeah.
knowing, right? Because even for me, obviously, I also have never been on TV or anything like that. But even when I started writing and people started
Mm-hmm.
knowing me more and I started being perceived, I
Uh,
actually got a little bit scared. Like, oh
oh, tell
no.
me about that.
Yeah,
Yeah, tell me about
like
that.
I would write something and people would be like, "Oh, I found your story. I started following you because of this." Or people would send me DMs, or people might see me in person and be like, "Oh, I know you
Mm.
from that podcast. I saw you on stage at that thing." And
Uh,
it's a little bit, I like being low key. Like I want to be, I want to be respected, but I don't necessarily want to be known because on the other side of the compliments, people are like, "That story was trash. Your opinion is trash.
yes.
I don't like that you did this. I don't like," and I'm not writing it so you could like me. I'm just simply doing my job, just whatever. And so for me, I wasn't prepared. And so I think that even on a bigger stage, like a
Mm,
bigger platform like reality television, because there's also that extra kind of manipulation or massaging that producers are
yeah.
doing, they know that
Mm-hmm.
they have to tell a story. There has to be a villain. There has to be
Yes.
a person who is like an underdog and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to choose a lot of times
Yeah.
who you're gonna play in this story or in
Mm-hmm.
this narrative. And so you go in thinking that, yeah, I'm a good person, I'm a cool person, and maybe they catch you in a weak moment, and now it's like, oh, you're not a good person, and you're not
Yeah.
prepared for those bad moments or those dark moments or those just mistakes to be amplified at the level that they are. And so I genuinely don't know that there's a way to prepare, but I do think that there are certain people who can take control of the narrative and run with it. Like
Mm.
if I'm going to be the villain, I'm going to be the villain, and it is what it is. Or if I'm the good girl, I'm the good girl. But I've found that most people do not have a proper grasp on what to do with the celebrity, and so it's just kind of like it's either very disastrous or it feels um, like you're trying to you came here with an intention to get money or to get what, it never feels genuine either way. So it's just kind of
Yeah,
like, oh,
because we almost like know too much at this point, and it's when you were talking about your experience as a writer and then people having opinions on that, I'm just doing my job. It makes me think of like athletes who we often see, will be like really torn apart sometimes
yeah,
by viewers, by fans, and have to step away for a little while. And I think you even see that on reality shows where they're like, I got to take a break. I'm going to be off a few seasons because I think it's probably this thing. I wonder, if people are feeling like this is now become my job. If I'm
yeah,
a mainstay on the show, this is what I do for a living, and people, kind of almost making a game sometimes out of, really hating on people, that they don't actually know. They just think that they know,
yeah.
and I wonder what that feels like when people feel like, okay, I need to take a break. I can't do this. Even if I'm seemingly at the top of, my fame level and, a beloved mainstay on the show, but I can't do this right now.
Yeah, it's hard because it the way that viewers feel about it is that you're coming onto the show, you are signing up to be part of this discourse or to be the subject of the discourse, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe their intention is not to necessarily I don't want to be all that y'all talk about. I just came to be on the show
Yeah.
because it's a good opportunity. I want to show off my business. I want to find
Mm-hmm.
love. I want to have a new adventure,
Exactly.
et cetera, et cetera. But in the fine print of the contract you signed, it is that you are agreeing to be plastered across all of our televisions.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Mm-hmm.
going to talk about you at the water cooler, on TikTok, at church, in our DMs with our friends and our group chats and things like that. And so it's hard because with that celebrity, the visibility is inevitable, and
Yeah.
it's you can't sign up for it without signing up for that. And that's
Yes.
it's tough because even like I said, as a writer, like I'm not trying to be famous. I just write. Yeah, I just want to tell a story.
That's
Or,
what I do.
yeah, that's all I do. Or I'm an athlete. I just want to play the
Hmm.
sport. I'm a singer. I want to do this. But people
Yes.
feel entitled to your
Mm.
story and to you as a person. I do think that reality TV doesn't necessarily do a great job of protecting people from that, and I think that that's why we hear so
Yes.
many stories of people having like mental breakdowns and saying like I didn't feel safe, or I don't want to be part of this world anymore,
Hmm.
just because there's not enough cushioning or
Yes.
around it.
Yes. I think that makes a lot of sense. We've talked about how it impacts the people who are on the shows, and starting a little bit about how it impacts the viewers. One example that comes to mind, that we were talking about in the beginning a little bit, um, and it made me think of on the Real Housewives of Potomac. Yeah, it was Potomac. When they talked about colorism, because I studied
Ooh,
colorism and no one was really talking about it. And sometimes people would be even like, what's colorism? And then they brought it up on the show. And I was like, okay, so this is something that is happening. Like it is in the zeitgeist that people are talking about these topics. And it made me think of what you were saying before about, there's an ear to the ground of
yeah,
what is coming up. And so I thought that was like a really interesting example of something I didn't expect to be like a serious topic I didn't expect to be covered
yeah.
on a show like that. And I wonder if you've had that experience too when you've been covering different shows.
Yeah, I remember I wrote about that episode and
Mm-hmm.
the conversation that was going on that season, and I thought, kudos to Andy, and
Mm-hmm.
kudos to I think it was two of the Wendy and Candace at the time who were
Uh-huh.
discussing it. I thought that it was really interesting that they brought it up, but what was hard as a viewer, as someone who is, darker skin, a black
Mm-hmm.
woman who is
Mm-hmm.
having these conversations also, because I talk and write about colorism a lot. I always say
Yes.
I'm the colorism police. Like I'll watch TV. Why everybody?
Oh my God, you and I would be fun at a party.
Oh, literally, like, what's going on with the but I remember being so disappointed by the reactions of the cast to the discussion of
Yes.
colorism. It just felt so low vibrational, and it felt like they are they were playing in our faces, and it was hurtful, and I think
Mm,
that it set the course for those specific people who were involved in kind of like negating the colorism or downplaying it. It set them up to become um antagonistic figures to the people watching them. There's a reason
mm-hmm.
why maybe 2 or 3 seasons after that conversation happened, those people are widely disliked by much of the Potomac
Yes.
fandom, because it felt like when you are denying or downplaying colorism to your castmates, you're also downplaying it to us, people who have
Mm-hmm.
lived that experience. And so, it's just a reminder that when people have these discussions, you're talking about colorism or fat phobia or ableism or racism or misogyny on the show, and you're maybe discussing it in a way to make it seem like it's not real or it's fake, people can see that. And people who have
Yes.
lived that experience are now like, oh, so now I know what kind of person you are. Or it's a trigger. Like I
Mm-hmm.
am, oh, I'm a woman and I've been discriminated against in the workplace, or I've been harassed by a man, or I've been this and that. And you're talking about it in a way that's making it seem like it's not real, and it hurts. And so I think for a
Absolutely.
lot of people, that's why they might choose to tap out of things. I know that a lot of black women that I know, I kind of did this. I didn't watch The Bachelor for years because I thought
Mm-hmm.
black women on this show always suffer. I don't think I want to watch
Yes.
this anymore. And
Yep.
so I tapped out because of the effect that it was having on me personally. I don't know these people. I will never meet these people. I don't have anything
Mm-hmm.
to do with them. But watching these women get on the show and be portrayed in a certain way, it was hurtful to me. And I thought,
Yes.
"Man, I don't have the bandwidth for that." So I tapped out.
That's right. And you don't need to know them to know how you feel when you watch
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
And to say, this is not for me, like, I'm not enjoying this. The whole reason that I'm supposed to be watching these things is because I enjoy it or I'm getting something from it. And I also think, when I think about that whole colorism issue, for me, it felt like such a missed opportunity. If imagine the difference if they had someone like you, they're talking to them about it to kind of stop those conversations or like
Yeah.
make people slow down. It got very defensive and kind of strange, and it just it really went south in my opinion, and it could have been done in a way that actually could have been helpful.
Yeah.
And it just felt like, yes, like a really missed opportunity because they were trying to talk about this topic and they weren't really able to hear each other. I remember like, oh, I was this is great that they're talking about it. Then I saw it and I was like, oh, this is not good. This is not good. And it could have been different. And I think you're right that it does then skew every time you look at them, you remember those comments that were made,
Yeah.
made offhandedly and, very casually, and dismissing someone's experience and someone's pain. And I think that does stay with you. And I hope that if those kinds of things come up again, that they learn from those lessons, because it was not handled in a good way. And there's a lot of examples on that, like I know you've written about like AD on Love is Blind and that kind of thing. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I loved AD.
Me
It was
too.
sad. I was happy to see her like, well, she's great now. She got engaged to
Yeah,
a fine
she's
man
fine now,
from,
but
yeah, she's AD, we love you, girl. Shout out. But the whole process, I just felt like, what are we doing? What are we
yeah.
doing? And to see someone who is working on so many things, I felt like 80 was triggering for many women because it was like we've
Hmm.
been 80 before. We've been in that
Yeah.
situation and you can't reach in the TV and shake her and grab her. But just the way that it played out, I felt like Netflix, y'all know what kind of people that you're casting to be on these shows,
Mm.
and you are setting her and other people up for failure. I feel like 80 was one example. I think um the next season, the last season with, I can't even remember the people now, but I did y'all cast this properly? Are you casting people who want to actually get married, who are serious about,
Mm.
in committed long-term relationships, who have done the work of healing or who are interested in doing the work? And that whole season, I just felt like, how did this guy get this far? Clay, how did you get this
Yeah.
far on this show?
Clay. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
like how did
Well,
you?
and I think that kind of goes back to what you were saying is, how after so much about these shows and that it can catapult you into like some kind of fame, how many people are genuinely on there because they
Yeah,
really just want to find love versus they want to be remembered. And so that when they, go on to the next show, it's like, okay, they have their character already, and I think that it is hard probably to discern like who's genuine now, because unlike the first season of some of these shows where you didn't really know what was going to happen and it did feel like this is an original amazing thing that we're trying out. Now you kind of know what can happen if it goes well for you, or if you at least you become famous from it.
yeah. I mean, I'm of the opinion that you have to be a little bit you have to have stuff going on to go on a show like Love is Blind.
Yes.
Genuinely, I do feel like the premise of it is absolutely ridiculous, and I am someone who's very oddly traditional when it comes to getting married. Like, it's not
Uh-huh.
something that you play around with. It's very serious. It's
Yeah.
a binding legal contract at the end of the
Mhm.
day, right? It's something that you think about, and I've always felt very skeptical of it, but it's worked for people. So I can't,
Yeah.
downplay that. I do think that Netflix knows that um people want to watch the show, and the more dramatic, the juicier it is, the better, and
Mhm.
so they
Of
cast
course.
people with that in mind. So you're pulling
Mhm.
people who are influencers on Instagram, who have no desire, spoken desire, to get married, who are not necessarily like living the life, not that there's a specific way to live if you want to get married, but these are people who are interested in being famous, and you are like, hey, do you
Yeah.
want to be on this show about marriage when you have another dating show about being single and meeting people on a beach? And you're pulling in these people and you're mixing them with people who are like, oh no, I do want to get married. I want my
Mhm.
dad to meet my husband before he passes away, this and that. And you're putting them all in one room or in one pod, and they're
Mhm.
meeting and they're sharing their deepest secrets. And then where's the extra support? Like, I feel like Netflix
Yeah.
needs to have a therapist, a counselor on site to sit and
Yeah.
talk with these people. Like, okay, show me your notes. Let's compare notes to help guide that process, because it's it doesn't feel fair, and not just for for Black women,
Mm.
but just in general for a lot of people. It's like we're going in
Yeah.
and we're hoping for the best, and then it's like, oh, actually this person's a big liar. This person is he's a liar. He doesn't want to get married, or he has commitment
Yeah.
issues. And so we're like, well, why did we waste so much of our time doing this?
I always think about that, like obviously the idea is to make juicy television, right? And how do you remember that these are real people? And they're not actors playing a role, at least
Yeah.
not completely,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit, but they're not even professional actors playing a role, who can know how to get in and out of character, right? These are people who their lives can be completely taken over, whether for years or for, just a season. So I think that, it kind of begs the question, like, if you think there are areas or there are shows where we're seeing more kind of mental health being represented, like if you think that there are shows that are doing it well, where they are either showing, people experiencing therapy, during the show, or that you think have, good support before or after?
Um, I hate to be so negative. No, but I know that I think I don't watch the show, but I know that I think Married at First Sight, they
Mhm,
have like mental health people on board, or at least like
mhm.
relationship experts and a
Yes.
therapist or something.
Mm,
And they show them talking to the person and maybe trying to explain like, hey, we match you up with this person
mm,
because you have similar values or this and that. I know that Love is Blind, they said that they do have a therapist on set. I don't
mm.
know what the therapist be doing because there are more conversations that need to be had. And I also think that
Mm,
um more uh mental health evaluations for people going in are very
yes.
important, because I do think that there needs to be a more rigorous process for something like this. Of course, it's television, it's entertainment, but to your point,
Mhm.
these are real people. And
Yes.
there is an immediate impact on these people's lives. They go on the show, people are talking about them every single day, creating
Mhm.
TikToks, creating threads, they're exposing this. During the last season, prior to this of Love is Blind, somebody revealed that they had children that no one knew
Yes.
about. Yeah, that whole thing with
Yes.
Tyler and
Mhm.
Ashley. And it sparked a whole firestorm of people were going to their legal documents and they were finding out all of this stuff. And I thought,
Yeah.
if the people who are behind the show, the executives, producers, had done due diligence, you wouldn't
Mhm.
even cast someone like that. There are
No,
too many,
definitely not.
it's not even just red flags, but legally, this is a very
Mhm.
sketchy situation. And I think that there's not enough prep beforehand. And then even kind of like an
Yeah.
exit interview, like, okay, everybody, is everyone okay? Do you want to sit down and talk? Can we do some breathing exercises,
Yes.
some meditations, just letting people talk? I just feel like they just let people go raw into the real world
That's
after,
right.
yeah, after being sequestered in this fake space for such a long time.
Yeah. I mean, at least like that's my view of what happens. That's what it seems like.
Yeah,
In the
yeah,
way people talk about their experience, it seems like they're kind of like left to their own devices. But I wonder, what it would feel like if when you go on the show or say, okay, for 3 months or 6 months after your time ends, if you're on this one season of it, we'll provide you with mental health support. I think that now we're starting to be so much more aware of these things. I
yeah,
wonder how that would improve the quality of the people who might decide to be on these shows. Or if that's not the goal, necessarily if you're producing one of these shows that, you want the people who are like, it's fine, I don't care, I'll be fine, I don't need I don't need any support. It should all work out great. If you want those people on there instead, it's something that I always think about. And when you do see it on television, I think we've talked about this before. Like I am happy for it. If I see, I think the Housewives franchise does this pretty consistently, where you see them in some kind of therapy or like with a life coach or that kind of thing. Um, and so I appreciate that, because I feel like it's normalizing
yeah.
seeking out help. Like even these people that you might see as aspirational, like they're getting help too. Uh, and you wonder if you're getting like a real true view of what therapy is as well, because usually it's not done on camera in front of millions, and it's there would in a normal situation there'd be so much more that's confidential.
Yeah.
And so what do you think when you see that on television? Because I think we both agree support is needed, it's good to have that. But what's your view when you actually see it happening?
I mean, I, as a person who goes to therapy and is a big like proponent of it in real life, I think it's great to see it. But again, to your
Mm.
point, the therapist, they're talking to the therapist and then literally cut to a scene where XYZ is happening. So it's not to say like the therapy isn't working, but how
Yeah.
seriously are we taking this process? The growth and the
Yeah.
journey is not matching, like the work isn't showing, right? And so
Yeah.
obviously, you can't judge anyone's journey. Things happen. We've all been there. But I do think that, when we talk about mental health and the benefits of therapy and
Hmm.
being in tune with your mental and emotional state, it's really important that these reality shows kind of show that it is necessary, that these things go hand in hand.
Mm.
I actually think that shows like Love is Blind or The Bachelor would kind of benefit from like a bonus episode that's kind of like, we
Oh,
got it
that's
for two
interesting.
people, uh
Yeah.
or we have a, you came out of the pods and your engagement didn't work, or it did work. We would love to see you sit down with a counselor and talk about it. Like, this
Mhm.
person broke my heart. If I was like, if AD sat down with someone and say like, yeah, this was really difficult for me, I would have loved to seen how she got from the end of Love is Blind to where she is now, like that
Mhm.
filling in the gaps, because I think that shows the benefit of therapy, that shows the benefit of doing that work, in that inner work, and talking
Yes.
to yourself and learning from your mistakes. And like applying the notes is so important. And I think that these shows that show therapy, they don't necessarily show the application of the notes. Like you sat with your
Hmm.
therapist, and then what did you do with it? The homework. My
Yes.
therapist was always like, here's your homework. And I don't want to do that. But that's how you grow from it. And that's how you
That's how
make
you grow.
progress.
That's right.
So
Yes. Yeah. I think that it's an interesting like idea to show that, because I do think that as viewers we're often kind of left filling in the gaps ourselves. Like we're both happy
mhm.
for AD. I don't know how that AD got to become this AD. What I guess it was, I'm sure, her maybe sometimes seeing yourself on television and you're like, oh, I don't want to be that person.
Yeah,
Like I
yeah.
have some work to do. I think that sometimes it can lead to that kind of like introspection. But sometimes I think there's not that opportunity, or you need to be guided through it. And I also feel like when I watch some of those shows and they start bringing in like their family members, and you get that whole dynamic too, like
Yeah.
you're really opening up not just yourself, but everyone around you to the scrutiny. Sometimes I've seen shows and I've said, oh, okay, like, oh, I met the parents. Oh, I can see why they act like that, and I know I'm judging everyone there, and I think that having some kind of support, or, especially post when everyone's kind of opened up their lives and shared, all their secrets, could really make the difference probably for a lot of people, and how they do transition back into the world if it's not available for them to keep with this kind of like reality fame lifestyle.
Yeah, like I went through all of this. Everyone saw it. Everyone knows all
Yeah.
about me. What do I do with this? And I think
Yes.
like using the experience as a lesson, or because we're here to be entertained, but I also think that we can learn a lot from reality TV, whether we know it or
Yes.
not, right? And so seeing someone be introspective about their process and saying like, man, I went through this thing. I was on a Real Housewives and I left because it was getting too stressful, or I
Hmm.
was on The Bachelor and I didn't get chosen, I got dumped, or I got sent home. This is how I processed it. This is where I am now. It would be so helpful because so much of us in real life, we don't necessarily process or sit with the negative things that
Yes.
happen to us. And we just kind of move forward. Like that was a terrible experience. I'm moving forward, but you don't necessarily think about it and be like, okay, I learned from this. I'm not going to do it this way.
Hmm.
Or I am proud of myself for surviving that situation and I can move into the next phase of my life with confidence. I just feel like the shows, again, the intention is not necessarily to teach us something, but
Hmm.
because we are engaging with media and it is a reflection of who we are, it would be so beneficial to kind of like close the loop by like, okay, here's what we learned from this, and here's what you
Yes.
can take with you. But I guess that's a different type of TV show that
I guess.
Netflix is like, we're not using our money for that. No, go to
No,
therapy.
exactly. They're like, that's not going to be fun.
Yeah,
Because to your point, it is not fun to sit in that discomfort, as individuals, or watching people on TV do it.
yeah,
That's not really what I think a lot of people want to see. Even if it could be helpful to us, it doesn't. If you're telling me this is the idea for your show, that's probably going to get turned down, by
yeah,
a lot of people. But I do think that it is important in what we can learn, and about how people, move forward, how we all move forward. I think one thing that I always think people, I wonder if they consider when they go on some of these shows, like, so for example, the Housewives franchise, probably more than half of them end up divorced. Like they're
yeah,
not they're
yeah.
not housewives anymore. Even if they started married to someone, and a lot of times now they don't even bother. But even if they started out being married to someone, like most of the marriages don't last. And like you think about that scrutiny and what people maybe are giving up in order to have that kind of lifestyle. Like I wonder. I wonder if people wouldn't agree to go on as much if they were thinking about it that way. Like, am I going to sacrifice, not just my privacy, but maybe, this relationship that I have, because it can't hold up to the scrutiny, or the other person did not sign up for this.
Yeah. I mean, everyone thinks that we all think that we're stronger than we really are. And sometimes we don't know how strong we are, right? And so you
Yeah.
think that, yeah, my relationship is cool, it's chill. And then the TV and the cameras expose a different part of it. Or
Yes.
maybe, people are tweeting or they're making
Mm.
TikToks and be like, have you noticed that so and so's husband acts like this? And people are
Yes.
coming up with conspiracy theories and things like that. And so now you're noticing maybe things that you accepted, like uh the guy acts like this. That's normal for me. And then other people are like,
Mhm.
no, it's not normal.
Yeah. Good
And
point.
in highlighting things in your life that maybe you had accepted or settled for, or something is not a big deal to you, and maybe you are okay with that and other people are not. So it's just like constantly we're projecting things. People are projecting
Mm,
their lives onto the reality stars, but by being on the reality show, the reality stars are projecting their life and lifestyles onto us. So it's like constantly
yes.
back and forth, back and forth. Um, and you don't think it's a big deal until you get on Twitter and see people, your name is trending, your family's trending. I hate her
Mm.
house. She can't dress. All of that stuff. You're like, wait a minute. I thought I looked cute that episode. Okay,
Exactly.
you know. So you don't really know because we're honestly we're not meant to know so much about each other. I feel we're not meant to
Oh,
be constantly exposed to other people at the rate that we are currently. And I
yes.
do think that social media and television and just just being online has done a lot to make us hyper aware and hyper
Mhm.
conscious in a way that is not necessarily the healthiest. And then to make it worse, you go on reality TV, and now everyone,
Yeah.
millions of people have opinions about your outfits, about your relationship, about your self
Mhm.
esteem, about your job, about your nose and your teeth, and that and that. So it's just, it's really difficult. I have a lot of empathy for that. I wouldn't do it. So
Yeah.
I think they're very brave to do that, but it's tough, and most people cannot necessarily sustain that burden.
Yeah. I think that's probably right. I think that you probably just have to lose some part of yourself.
Yeah.
The part of yourself that cares, what people think, or that um shies away from so much scrutiny. Like you're saying, people are scrutinizing you, having an opinion about you, about your life, about your relationships, and then by turn you're also probably looking at yourself like, oh, is this okay, or
Yeah.
was that a huge mistake, or is this not the love of my life? All these kinds of things. I wonder how people can reclaim like their sense of self, whether through these experiences, watching these shows. Sometimes I watch a lot of them and I have to take a break myself. I'm like, oh, that didn't feel good. Or even when something like the fighting gets out of control, I'm like,
Oh,
oh, that's not fun to me anymore. I'm gonna need to take a break from that. So I wonder, what your thought is about how it then makes us think about ourselves, or the things that we enjoy and get out of these kinds of shows, and the things that we don't.
yeah. I mean, I've come to a point where I feel like if a show is getting too negative, we just
Mm,
gonna have to take a break. Because I could watch a drama
yeah.
for that. I can watch like
Yes, exactly.
I can read a book for that. We're here to enjoy and petty shade, light shade, joking. I don't know. I think that the times that we're in, life is already hard, and everyone is
Mm,
living through their own stuff. I have my own baggage. I have my own
yeah.
issues to deal with. So I would never intentionally walk into a show knowing like I'm gonna tell you all of these bad things that happen. I'm gonna fight with my friends. I'm gonna do all of that.
Yeah.
I'm being very selective about the things that I watch because it does have a real effect on me. That season of Potomac that you were talking about, I know so many people who tapped out after that season because
Mhm.
that conversation
Mhm.
was like the straw that broke the camel's back. I don't want to
Yes.
hear people downplaying colorism. I don't want to hear this. There was another season where people got into a fight and so many people left the fandom after that
Yes.
because like
Yes.
this is not the kind of TV show I watch, right? And so um we are now kind of taking back our agency as viewers to say like that's cool for y'all, I'm not gonna watch it. And so
Yes.
the ratings will suffer the more that
Mhm.
producers and executives are not policing the kind of things that happen on their TV shows. Again, it's TV, we're watching it for entertainment, but there is a fine line between entertainment and then kind of a darker thing that we're not trying to access. If we wanted to watch that, we could
Yes.
literally just go to the movies or we could watch the news.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly. Yes.
that's
But no, I think that's such an important point that, you definitely hear a lot of people talking about how they're protecting their peace, by any means necessary now, and that when something doesn't feel good, we're not compelled to keep watching it.
yeah.
And so you do hope that people realize that, okay, this maybe was like a formula that worked in the past and people used to like that, and now they're not responding to that anymore. And so like maybe we need to be more mindful,
Yeah.
of how we either treat the people that are on these shows, how we cast the shows, how we follow up and look after them later, because people are paying attention and they're noticing, and you can see that difference. And so I think I really appreciate, that point that you're making, that this is not just because I used to watch it. There's no guarantee that I'm going to continue watching it. I'll
Yeah.
take a break, and as long as the break needs to be, I'll do it, even if I used to really enjoy that show. I don't either enjoy what it's becoming, or I don't enjoy how it feels in the world as it is right now for me.
Yeah.
and you do see people making changes based on that.
Yeah, and there's no shortage of options. That's a thing too
Hmm.
that I think that
Yeah,
people need to
true.
remember, that you can watch any type of show, especially if you're even if you are like, oh, I love reality TV. There's so many different types of shows that you can
Hmm.
watch, and they're not going to be perfect. But if something is making you feel bad just because you
Yeah.
used to love The Bachelor and it's changed over time, and now it's like, oh, this feels bad, or sometimes the growth is not even about like the show is getting worse. It's just that you as a
Hmm.
person are recognizing, I actually don't like the concept of this show. I actually
Yeah.
have a problem with this type of format. I actually don't like the types of people that they keep bringing onto the show. Sometimes it's not about, the show becoming more ratchet or more negative.
Hmm.
It's you as a
Hmm.
person recognizing certain things that don't align with you. And I do think that,
Absolutely.
ultimately we don't owe networks or TV stations or reality shows, we don't owe them that loyalty. And you can just simply just turn off the TV. And
Yeah.
I don't yuck anybody's yum. I stopped watching The Bachelor for years, for a while, just because I was like, it's not,
Hmm.
this is an anti-black space. And then I would pop back in when there's a black person in the lead, and I would be like, oh, actually, you know what? I don't want to watch this anymore, and pop back out. That's
Yes.
your prerogative, and I do think that people should exercise that more, because what I
Hmm.
find is that people will hate watch, and you will
Yes.
complain like, this is so bad, this is so racist. I'm
Hmm.
so tired of black women being treated like this. They're not treated like that on every TV show. There's a
Yeah. So you don't have to
show.
watch that one.
Exactly.
Yes.
You can go their
Hmm.
own and watch Ready to Love, which everybody's black on there. Black women
Yeah.
are always getting chosen in this and that. Or you're like, I want more diversity in this. Maybe
Hmm.
go watch Love Island. Or I
Yes.
don't want to watch dating shows anymore. Go watch Real Housewives. Go watch Survivor. Go watch,
Yes. Such a
there's
good
so many
point.
options. And I
Hmm.
think that people should, if you have outgrown a genre of television, that is your right, and you can go check something else out. You should.
Yes. Yes. But I love that, like not yucking anyone else's yum, but just being honest with yourself. Okay, this doesn't feel good to me. I'm not going to
Hmm.
do this anymore. I'm going to find something that does, or I'm going to take a break altogether, that
Yeah.
you have agency at least as far as that goes, And so I think I really appreciate that point.
Yeah.
Okay. So it has been really great talking to you. This is a lot of fun, like a fun, like, but also I think, introspective conversation about something that is so much a part of like pop culture,
Yeah.
so much a part of our day to day, and like really kind of digging into what it kind of does to us, when we watch that, or the benefits and, the drawbacks for sure. So if people want to find out more about you and what you're doing, I know you don't want fame, but if they just want to read your articles, where can people find you?
So yeah, I'm not really, this is so wild. A couple years ago, I couldn't have said this. I'm only available, like social media wise, I'm only
Mhm.
on Instagram. And that's the
Okay.
only place where I post. I'm on TikTok, stalking people, just watching and seeing and things like that. But I don't really post on there. So you can find me at Ineye Komo, INEYEKOMO on Instagram. You can read any of my past things at refiner29.com, or you can keep up with me at cron.com, where I am overseeing Texas culture and conversations about the great state of Texas and what's going on in there. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And of course, I'm on Instagram and TikTok as Therapy with Dr. Patrice. Thank you so much for joining me. This is a great conversation.
Thank y'all. Go watch some TV. Good TV.